A few videos ago, I was talking about the left-hand path, and I started off with a disclaimer that that video in particular was not going to be about high magic versus sorcery. I realized with hindsight that it might have been a good idea to make this video on sorcery and high magic before the left-hand path video, if I really wanted that disclaimer to have any meaning for many of you kindly giving of your time to watch these videos. So let me make amends with this introduction to the distinctions that should be made, some basic, some more subtle, between high magic and sorcery. Just to clarify my suggestion that the conversation on left-hand and right-hand paths is almost, if not entirely, unrelated. The names high magic and sorcery really don't help in this respect, and the fact that some circles call sorcery low magic probably makes things even worse. I mean, what's going to sound more like the opposite of high magic than low magic? And yet the distinction is more like when you talk about the upper body and the lower body. Nobody's pitting those two against each other. Nobody's suggesting you pick a camp like, ooh, you like having a rib cage? Better not get used to that pelvis. There's a war on, haven't you heard? Those lower bodyists walking around like they own the place. What's the world coming to? Obviously, this scenario makes no sense. Both halves of the body have their own function, and one half of the body is no more nor less essential than the other. And its absence is certainly not experienced as a relief to the other half. Obviously, one is actually directly useful to the other. I think it's quite natural for an outsider to confuse the distinction between high magic and sorcery with the distinction between, say, left and right-hand path practices, or between dualist and non-dualist philosophies, simply because high magic is mostly associated with the Theurgic schools. In fact, some circles use the term high magic as an equivalent alternative to the word Theurgy, which is essentially the process by which a human realizes his or her divinity, realizes intellectually and also practically. A number of rites, rituals, and processes are involved to put the practitioner first in touch with his or her higher self, variously called the Holy Guardian Angel or Holy Demon in many of the modern Western mystery schools, with apotheosis or unity with the ultimate divinity being the ultimate goal, or at least the realization of unity with ultimate divinity. On the other hand, you have sorcery, which is the manipulation of supernatural forces for the purpose of worldly goals, such as putting food on the table, finding a romantic partner, or any other human need or desire that doesn't necessarily directly lead to apotheosis. Can one exist without the other? Sure, it can. Only for apotheosis to happen, it helps if you're not worried about the bailiffs taking over your home, or how you're going to feed your kids. On the other hand, some of the outcomes that sorcery can facilitate actively get in the way of apotheosis. So naturally, many of the Western mystery schools discourage such practices. Basically, anything that tips the practitioner towards the growth of their ego or lower self at the expense of their spiritual advancement is discouraged. They recognize that the ego is necessary, of course, which is why they not only permit but encourage certain forms of sorcery. But they warn that the ego should simply not be confused with the higher self, and as such shouldn't be inflated beyond its rightful place. As I've mentioned many times before, that doesn't mean it should be suppressed, only kept in check. Sorcery, or as some people call it, low magic, on the other hand, is just a tool. There is no morality associated to it, any more than there is any morality associated to using an electric drill. A moral or an immoral person can both use a power drill, and Black & Decker definitely have no mention of the concepts of good and evil in their user manuals. Sorcery is a wide term that encompasses work with angels, demons, and spirits of any other denomination, energy work, acts of divination, elemental work, necromancy, and so on, all of which can be used to aid the practitioner towards apotheosis, but can also be used for any number of other things, ranging from extremely helpful to absolutely destructive, to the self and to others. So to resume, you could say that high magic practitioners actually use a lot, but not necessarily all of, sorcery, and people who identify as sorcerers specifically tend to be, but are not necessarily, wary of high magic. They see sorcery as an end in itself, and I often see sorcerers who are even resentful of high magic practitioners for adding this moral dimension to the craft. To me, it doesn't seem so much as an addition of a moral dimension as much as it is a selective use of a power tool that is simply being handled with the kind of caution that such a power tool calls for. Now, the flip side of this, of course, is certain high magic practitioners not necessarily realizing the heritage and origins of some of the sorcerous arts that they use. And while I don't see anything wrong with using a process that works, we do have to be aware that appropriation, so in other words, taking in other cultures' practices, changing them, and claiming they were ours the whole time, and that this is the way they were supposed to be performed, well, I think we're generally as a society slowly coming to an understanding that that's not a good look. So yes, I can completely understand that some sorcerers would have legitimate bad feelings against certain high magic practitioners. But I'm sure we can differentiate between bad manners and the cancellation of humanity's natural reach towards divinity by association. Well, I hope so anyway. Even if that reach isn't at the top of everyone's to-do list. It doesn't have to be to admit that it is at the top of some people's, and has been for as long as we can collectively remember. That reach isn't illegitimate, it's not unnatural, and if some people can empower that reach with the power tool that is sorcery, well then surely that's like empowering a horse-driven cart with technology originally designed for boiling potatoes or brewing tea. Bring the two together and you have a steam engine. But that shouldn't stop anyone from still enjoying a stew and a nice cup of Earl Grey. There's a terrific book by P.T. Mistleburger on the topic of high magic and sorcery and the healthy balance that can be found between the two. The Dancing Sorcerer is a book that I've already reviewed, so you can definitely check out my video linked in the description if you're interested in reading more on this topic. And in the meantime, all that remains for me to do is to thank you for your time and attention and to invite you to put down your own thoughts on the matter down in the comments section in your usual respectful, common ground seeking manner that I never cease to admire and for which I'm really eternally grateful. Now, speaking of eternal gratitude, let me say a word of thanks to the Foolish Fish members, all of whom contribute to making this channel sustainable. I really can't thank you enough for your incredible support. It means the world to me. And thank you in particular to all the level 3 members whose names are scrolling by on the left-hand side there. I honestly don't know where I'd be without you. Definitely not making videos on YouTube on this subject I'm so passionate about. If you're watching and you're wondering what memberships are about, I'll invite you to click on the join button next to the subscribe button, which takes you to a page that explains how it all works and what you get in exchange for your support and so on. And if you can't see that join button, it might be because you're on an iOS device, in which case you can get around that by visiting YouTube and any of my videos in Chrome. For now, I'll wish you a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you're watching. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and the subscribe button if you haven't done so already, of course, and I'll see you very soon with another video.